First of all, Happy New Year. Welcome back to Laurence McKenna on LFC channel. Secondly, wasn't a great New Year's Eve present from Real Madrid to Liverpool or from Trent Alexander-Arnold to Liverpool, if that is indeed the present that he was trying to deliver. But in looking at all of the reaction, and boy, was there a lot of reaction, because a lot of people want to see what Trent Alexander-Arnold is doing and ultimately possibly some of Liverpool's demise as a result of that. I've got a few more conclusions. I think this story is going to evolve in terms of what position Trent takes, what position Liverpool take, which seems very clear, what position Real Madrid end up taking, which also seems very clear. And I think it's just worth acknowledging at this point, and everyone in the comments was kind of saying, oh, this take, that take. Whatever way you cut it, you're going to be able to look reasonable, because all of these things are hypotheticals. The hypothetical of him staying, not real yet. There is an incredible amount of potential in there, but the same goes for the Real Madrid move as well. And the same goes for everything in between. The same goes with this idea of if he leaves in January, which I can see why you would think that might happen, but the idea of Liverpool being able to find a new right back in that period is very, in fact, distinctly unlikely. So I think there's a lot of different ways to tell this story, and there are certainly people using it online to bash Liverpool. I want to go through some of these comments that I've seen online, some of the takes, some of these people who aren't Liverpool fans, aren't necessarily Real Madrid fans, and don't know the history of Liverpool or the history of what has gone on between these two clubs, in order to make what I would say is an informed idea around this, rather than just saying, and this is one take I'm really bored of, it's just business, guys. Football is ultimately a business. Like, ultimately, it's also entertainment. Ultimately, it's also soothing for some people. Ultimately, it's also community. It's care. It's belief. It's all these things. And the idea that business trumps all, despite the fact that obviously the Premier League has very much built itself on this, is crazy to me. I just want to lay that down as a foundation to any of this. Liverpool, as a football club, and I can say this relatively confidently, would still exist whether the Premier League and the Champions League existed or not. It wouldn't be the same entity, but there would still be people going to watch Liverpool Football Club or some semblance of Liverpool Football Club, even if the Premier League and the Champions League and Real Madrid and everyone else weren't acknowledging Liverpool's existence. There will be other clubs that will play, and it would just exist as it did 100 years ago, whatever you want to call it, right? But I realised in the chat that there are people who all just have their take. There are Real Madrid fans in there. I'm going to read a Real Madrid fan's take in just a second. Does it make sense for Trent? I think is a really interesting one. I tried to bring some of this together yesterday in a video. First of all, whatever's going to make sense for Trent is, we know that Trent is a talented football player. Things tend to work out for a talented football player. Tend to. Liverpool itself is a fishbowl. Liverpool, to come from Liverpool, is kind of a badge of honour in the first place. I come from Liverpool, I wear that as a badge of honour. I don't have the accent, I didn't live there for a majority of my life. I don't necessarily think I have a lot of the traits of someone who lives in Liverpool on a day-to-day basis. But there are still huge amounts of my family that are from Liverpool, come from Liverpool. I go visit in Liverpool. I love that city. I love going back there. I love feeling at home, in inverted commas, even though I now call home somewhere else. That's a feeling that Liverpool overall as a city gives you. And I imagine most people get when they go back to a place that they feel some affiliation and affinity to. Trent lives there and has lived there his whole life, or relatively. He doesn't even live in Liverpool anymore, but that's not really the point. He still goes to go get tea at his mum's once a week. He still goes and sees friends. He's still got family who are based in Liverpool. And that's a big factor in this, I think. Liverpool can become a bit of a fishbowl. It can become a bit of a, especially for a local lad, it can, just ask Robbie Fowler, it can feel very intense. But that's part of this badge of honour, that's part of the experience. And if you are giving and taking with the local people, as you probably would anyway, there is something to get back. You get what you give in this city. And Liverpool is an incredibly giving, generous city. And I can't say this enough, actually. Charity-wise, sure, but even just to people. There are a number of people who I think were quite critical of Trent at one point. There are a number of people in the club, outside the club, but were very critical. His performances at one point weren't great. His passing record was very poor. He was being asked to make some very difficult decisions and passes during the game by Jurgen Klopp. And that was part of his development. That was a difficult development period that Liverpool supported him through. A lot of people saying drop him, a lot of people saying I don't think he's good enough, all these kind of things. Most people, a majority of the stadium and the majority of the fan base stuck by Trent because they understood his role better than people who aren't at the club. And I think, again, I'm going back to this. I saw Chelsea fans last night talking about Gerrard. I'll talk about the Gerrard thing in a second. I saw other people talking about Rooney leaving for United. I saw other people talking about Michael Owen. I saw people talking about Steve McManaman. All four of those situations, 5 if you want to count Rooney, are very different situations. And first of all, Wayne Rooney, Everton. Everton at the time, pretty poor club, like, you know, good in terms of stature, but not in terms of what they could offer Wayne. There was no possibility in them winning the Champions League or the Premier League, whilst they were on the rise, and there was possibly this idea that they could break into the top four and make themselves a more permanent fixture there. That ultimately didn't feel realistic once Wayne had left the club, and I think that endorsement of Wayne Rooney would have done something down the years. It would have been a pull. To go and play with Wayne Rooney would have been massive, and I think that's something that a lot of people acknowledge. A factor in that is that the club will, as Liverpool, will want people to know, you can come and play with Trent Alexander-Arnold here. You can be one of those people who is alongside the mega global stars here. That's a big pull. The other two people signing contracts, which will be a whole other video later, is another thing. But, you know, that's a big factor. The Michael Owen factor. Owen left coming off the back of a really good season, coming off the back of Rafa Benitez entering, and essentially Real Madrid were showing interest because he was one of the great goal scorers of the world. They were as greedy as they are now, and they wanted a Ballon d'Or winner, someone who was a very elite level striker, or at least presented that way, and someone who could essentially come in as a humble guy and come off the bench for them, be someone who would ultimately work his way into the team. I don't know whether it worked out for Michael there, but ultimately he didn't leave the club acrimoniously. The time when Liverpool fans started to turn on him or dislike him, if you like, was the period where ultimately he went to Manchester United and went somewhere else. He said now he's tried to work his way back to the club, but football's a tribal game, and I think that's something else we should acknowledge in a second. McManaman ultimately worked his way out of the club. I think at the time, I remember people were quite frustrated with him anyway, because he seemed like he was smelling his own farts just a little bit too much and enjoying it at that point. A lot of people were frustrated with the way that he was playing, the way that he was carrying the ball. They were frustrated overall with that team, actually. They seemed like they had unfulfilled potential in that side, not only for Scousers, but anyone who'd entered the club. And a lot of people just were sick of the way that Liverpool was run at that point. They needed to modernise. And ultimately, like, there was an understanding that whilst Liverpool were okay, they were stuttering. And they weren't really in a position to offer McManaman the heights that he wanted to reach. And ultimately, he reached great heights at Real Madrid. Again, possibly reflective of what's going on at Liverpool. But Liverpool ultimately is a club that can offer Champions League football and Premier League football, at least this season and possibly into the next, you know, and beyond that. You know, I don't want to say, comparing the two clubs is like comparing apples and oranges. They're two very different experiences. Real Madrid are consistently in the Champions League. That's going to offer you more commercial opportunities. And more often than not, Liverpool have consistently been in the Champions League / Europe more recently. The Klopp era felt very up and down towards the end, especially towards the end, because ultimately, like, there were a lot of fitness issues. There were very unusual things that were happening. There were rebuilds happening, those kind of things. I think ultimately, like, we realise the reason Madrid get into the Champions League is not because they're always good. It's because they have a stranglehold on La Liga. They get disproportionate amounts of money because of the way they've set up the league. And they've ultimately been in charge of Spain and in that area for decades, possibly, you know, over 50 years now. Those guys have got a bit of a monopoly on that league, and that's very different to the way that Liverpool are. It creates a very different experience, a very different journey to the one that Liverpool will be on. If you want to go to Real Madrid and have an easy goal, if you want to have something which is, we'll go win a title, we'll go win La Liga, that's a very different goal to the one that is set up at Liverpool. The one that's set up at Liverpool is we are competing in probably the most difficult league in the world right now, probably against some of the best managers in the world right now. Amorim, Pep Guardiola, you know, you can say whatever you want about Pep right now. City will be back in no time at all. Arsenal, Newcastle United, that's 5 teams that ultimately, I think, on their day could probably beat most of La Liga. Like, if you even Newcastle could beat most of La Liga, if I'm being quite honest. The technical proficiency of that league is very high, but the intensity, the other things that go along with it, just don't stack up. And that's ultimately why I think Real Madrid have been one of the only teams that's able to consistently beat English sides over the last few years, along with Barcelona, who are very patchy, and Atletico Madrid, who are also very patchy. Knockout football ultimately isn't a great way to test whether the two leagues are stronger than each other, but you get my point. Again, it's a very different experience in either league. So I just think it's a bit ridiculous to compare these two experiences and say, well, Real Madrid is a better experience, because ultimately the belief which has been created around the club is, and this is a narrative rather than a reality, we're the biggest club in the world, therefore we are the best. Biggest is best doesn't always match up to everyone's expectations. Gerrard. This is a very big stick that people are currently using to beat Liverpool. I was alive for this time. There'll be a majority of you, or some of you watching this video, I'd argue a majority, who wouldn't have been alive or old enough to remember what this period was like for Liverpool. If you're watching this and you were born in the 21st century, or even the late 20th century, you will not understand what it was like to be a Liverpool fan in that era. You will not understand what it was like to go from the 80s, which ultimately I was born, you know, I was conscious of Liverpool at the end after that. So I knew that I always thought we were a good team growing up. Like as a kid, you just think your team is good, right? You become dissociated from that idea at about the age of 6 or 7, maybe just slightly younger, when, like, you know, some of your heroes begin to take falls, but also you just start to go out into the real world and people start to go, what are you talking about, mate? Like, you know, I remember once, like, there was a painter and decorator at my grandma's and he was like, oh, you support Liverpool, I feel sorry for you. And as a 5 or 6 year old, ultimately he was joking. I didn't really know what the joke was. Does that make sense? Like, so I didn't realize how bad Liverpool were. Coming out of that and rebuilding with Gerrard and with Carragher and, you know, modernising the club was a massive step for Liverpool. It was moving away from what a lot of people considered to be sacred traditions at the club of the boot room and those kind of things. Roy Evans was the end of the boot room, which was started ultimately by Bill Shankly as a way of having a legacy, as a way of passing down knowledge and passing down methods and ideas between generations and ultimately upgrading them. It was a little room of very smart, industrious men who all won things with Liverpool. You know, ultimately, I feel quite sorry for Roy Evans because he's very apologetic, but he was always part of that. He was always a big element in that room as one of the backroom staff. That's really important. And we got Gerard Houllier to continentalise Liverpool, to modernise the transfer process, to give us better links on the continent because we were losing out in transfers to other people. And ultimately, it took the club into the 21st century, which was really, really important. Stick with me here because it's going somewhere. The gap at that point between Liverpool and someone like Real Madrid and someone like Manchester United was that our thinking had not revolutionised yet. And I'm not saying, by the way, that our thinking was necessarily bad. It just didn't match the task that was at hand with winning the Premier League or competing in Europe. There were still great nights. My first football night came during that period. I learned to love Liverpool, even though they were an imperfect, very patchy side. You enjoy the great moments, similar to what Manchester United are right now. You enjoy the great moments when you bloody someone else's nose, you enjoy the big score lines, and you invest in the young guys who you think represent you in some fashion. That's not Liverpool anymore. Liverpool, they've been through Hicks and Gillette. We've been through moving on from the very old owners. We've been through moving into the FSG era, and now we're very solidly within that. I don't know what their future plan is, what they want to sell, whatever it is, but ultimately FSG find themselves in a position where there is a relatively steady hand on the tiller, at least at this point. And, that's a very different prospect to what was happening in the Gerrard era. Gerrard was at a Liverpool club where Igor Biscan was starting alongside him in midfield. We'd only just got a young Xabi Alonso, a Luis Garcia, Owen had left. It felt like there were a couple of young guys who weren't going to make it in the team, and Gerrard was the guy who was ultimately putting Liverpool on his back at the time, and he wanted to win Premier League titles. He was an incredibly ambitious player. But that was kind of the point. He wanted to go and win Premier League titles, which was what Liverpool weren't offering him. Trent has won already and come close in at least 3 or 4 other races in the Premier League. He's shown he can consistently perform at a very high level. And Liverpool have shown no reason for Trent to believe that would drop off, unless, of course, Trent has seen things or knows plans that we don't. Like, ultimately, we know that, David Ornstein said Salah will ultimately try to re-sign, Virgil will try to re-sign. Trent looks like he's on his way to Real Madrid, but there are plenty of players there who love playing at Liverpool. It may also be that and I think most people aren't really considering this at this point, Trent has been told you will not have the development path that you want at Liverpool. And as much as we love you as a player, we love what you currently do for us. We love the distribution that you have. We love you as a right back. But ultimately, the move for Zubimendi in the summer was a big move for Liverpool. It was something which would have shown that everyone else, A, we were serious, but B, that we wanted someone who could dictate things in the centre of midfield, and we didn't feel like we currently had that in our squad in terms of ball distribution, in terms of turnover, in terms of winning the ball, all these different aspects. We didn't feel like we had that in the squad, and we didn't feel that there were players in the team who could fulfil that potential that we needed. Zubimendi in slot and in Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards' eyes was the solution to that. Trent wants to move into the centre of midfield, and he would not get that opportunity if Zubimendi was that player. He has not had that opportunity, really, apart from this ghost, Bishop role that you see out there. as much as I'd imagine maybe he wants to. I don't know if Real Madrid are going to offer that to him. I don't know what they're telling him. I don't know if they're saying, like, look, you won't be a 6, but there is the chance to be an 8 here. There is a chance to play alongside Jude Bellingham. This was a Jude Bellingham image at some point. This was him doing that. Ultimately, that is a very alluring prospect for more money, for a very big sign-on fee, and to play at an institute that ultimately is different to Liverpool and owns another place. If you want to be Kevin Durant, if you want to go to the Golden State Warriors and win something and, challenge for everything because, that's the way the club is set up and, essentially there is a skew towards you winning it anyway, great. That's not the same as winning it at Liverpool. That's not the same experience. You're not going to get the same adulation from the fans. And, this is one thing that I realized in I've got 4 or 5 Liverpool chats, probably more, just on WhatsApp alone. I've got 4 or 5 Liverpool chats, but there are more on Twitter and Discord and all sorts of things. Ultimately, they realized, oh, well, if Trent says he wants to go to Madrid, there is no more chanting, the Scouser in our team. There is no more of this, oh, this guy represents us. This is booing at Anfield after that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. And it goes back to the Gerrard point. And this is why I want to finish this Gerrard point very conclusively. A lot of people on Twitter talking about, and ultimately they're Chelsea fans who believe that Gerrard would have done well at the club, which he probably would have. He probably would have dominated the Premier League with that club because they were set up to dominate. That's what happens when you get a Russian billionaire in who ultimately loses some money down the back of the couch. But the point is, right, Gerrard wanted to leave because he'd had his head turned, not even necessarily by Chelsea. I think it was more by Mourinho and the project that Mourinho was doing there. He probably had his head turned by other clubs, other big projects. Rafa Benitez was building a project, and ultimately Liverpool was saying, we need you to stay and be a core of this. You're a big pull at this club. We've developed you. We've grown you. You want to be the Scouser. You want to bank on that as a name and as a product and as an idea. Don't leave the city then if that's what you want to do. People are talking about him being coerced into staying, that there were threats made to his family. I'd imagine so. Liverpool is, like I said, it's a goldfish bowl city. There are a lot of people who would have been angry. It's not a majority of those fans. And I'd imagine that there weren't a majority of people who were doing whatever coercion it was against Steven Gerrard. There are probably some very specific examples of those things happening, which also probably relate to very specific matters. It's not a whole fan base who were threatening Steven Gerrard's life at that time or anyone's life in his family. It's a very different story. Ultimately as well, Trent is being offered something different. The idea of Liverpool winning the Premier League was at least 3, maybe 4 seasons off for Liverpool and Gerrard when he wanted to leave. The idea of Liverpool winning the Premier League feels like it could be 1 season away. It could even be less than 1 season away at this point, right? And, that's me being very conservative. And that Slot is a consistent challenger. But the same goes for Real Madrid as goes for Liverpool. If he wants the challenge of a big European club, first of all, I don't think Trent can go to any other Premier League team. He can't go to Arsenal. He can't go to City, as much as Pep has had that word in his ear and all those kind of things. It has to be another country. It can't be AC Milan. It can't be Juventus. I don't think there's a big challenge at Dortmund or at Munich right now that would particularly excite me. And I think he'd just fall into another hierarchy. Real Madrid is really, possibly outside of Barcelona, you've seen the quotes of his about Barcelona, his only option to go and play somewhere else in Europe. PSG possibly, but even then you're not really getting the experience of Real Madrid that other people get, right? So that's fair enough, I think. That really is his only option. He's a world-class player. He's the premier world-class right-back. And I think the point goes, Gerrard probably would be held in higher esteem if he'd gone and won a Premier League, another Champions League, all those kind of things. He got to another Champions League final, and I think Messi and a few other guys have spoken about him being the best. But it really becomes undeniable, the point where you say, oh, I've won a Premier League title, or I've won multiple La Ligas, or I've won multiple whatever. That becomes undeniable as a debate then at that point. The debate around Salah at the moment is, well, there's a couple of debates around Salah, but one of them kind of relates to him and his silverware haul, which I think is ridiculous, but ultimately would be a very conclusive full stop on the end of the sentence. Ultimately, Trent will have realised that. He will know the path that Gerrard took. He will have spoken to Gerrard down the years, as will most Scousers in this team, and they'll know what the experience of being a Scouser in Liverpool is. You can't really speak to that experience unless you've lived in the city, unless you've regularly gone to the city, unless you've even been there as those players. It's a very unique experience. But don't tell me that somehow Gerrard stayed because, shirts were burned and those kind of things. I think there are a lot of different reasons why Gerrard stayed, and ultimately pretending that he was just coerced into it, it's kind of crazy. It's ultimately just a very, I'll read this Real Madrid fans comment now, and I think I'll show the difference between the people inside the club and their understanding and the people outside the club and their understanding. Ultimately, what I think a lot of people, and I want my international audience to realise this, is there are a lot of stereotypes in the UK around Liverpool and Scousers and people who come from the city. It's that they're historically poor, it's that they historically steal things, and it's historically that they take money from the government in order to maintain a lifestyle. Now, that's true throughout the country for a lot of very poor areas, but it's a particularly satisfying stick for a lot of rich people, or Tories, or whatever you want to call them, to beat Liverpool with, because it's a very easy way to say, quieten down you're getting a little above your station. And the Scousers are very good at getting above their station, or our station, if you want to include me as a Scouser. I don't think a lot of international fans know they're playing into these tropes and these stereotypes, and they don't realise that, it's the same kind of, as much as, and I'll make this comparison here, if you come from the Middle East, you will realise that there'll be stereotypes about you stepping into the UK. You'll realise there'll be people who will ultimately be Islamophobic towards you. There'll be people who are, they don't know what your life experience is. They don't know what your words mean. They don't know the local idiosyncrasies. They don't understand why you might do certain things. And Scouse not English is a very important phrase to Scousers, but also to English people. Again, they use it as a bit of a stick to beat the Scousers with. It's like, well, do you want to be English or not? Do you want to benefit from this or not? I think that's it's a tired trope at this point. It's not even really that relevant to modern England. It's pretty fun sometimes to have that back and forth, but sometimes it's also just really, it's a pretty lazy way of bringing people together. Of clubbing Liverpool fans together and then saying, oh, well, you're just this. It's sort of stupid. It doesn't really make any sense anymore. And if you live here, you will realise why. If you live in Liverpool even more, you'll realise why. But ultimately, I think the piece of evidence goes for me, I'm realising it's turning into a long video, but the piece of evidence goes for me. When Rafa Benitez signed at Chelsea, I spoke to a few journalists and I said, oh, what do you think of Rafa? And they went, well, he's a lovely guy. He's really nice. I really like him. And I was like, well, do you not remember that from his Liverpool days? And they went, I didn't go to the press conferences. And I thought, but you were talking about Liverpool regularly. You were talking about how Rafa Benitez had lost control, or all these kind of things. And they were like, yeah, but that was just from the videos I'd seen, or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, you weren't reporting from second or third hand stories that had come to you. And this is ultimately what happened, and is happening now with Trent, where it's like, oh, well, he's just a Scouser. He's a Scouser in the team. They should be more grateful, blah, blah, blah. I think that's crazy to me, first of all. I think it's also really tired. Let me talk to you about that. I think the fans will turn. I think saying he's a Scouser in the team, he cares about the team. Let's just assess that for a second. Ultimately, Liverpool cannot use the you're a Scouser in a team any more than Trent can use the you're just a big company thing. Being the Scouser in the team is important. It will ultimately get you a captaincy role much quicker. It will get you a lot more kudos. It will get a lot more marketing money, those kind of things. It will put you as the front and centre face of Liverpool. You're a right back. Like, ultimately, right backs very rarely become the front and centre face of Liverpool. You've been given that opportunity to do that. As much as the city is a fishbowl, he signed a 4-year contract knowing that it would end at the age of 26 when he'd be entering his peak years. He was offered a 6-year contract by Liverpool. I'd imagine he turned that down because, he wants to re-sign and get more money at some point. You can pressure Liverpool into re-signing you into more money by doing that. But he engineered this situation himself. They signed a 4-year contract. That's what they stipulated. That's what they wanted. Liverpool offered him a 6-year contract. Don't forget that. This is by his own design. This is by the people around him's own design. It's not Trent alone operating on his own. It's people who operate around Trent. The same wasn't true of Stevie or Owen or Macca or whoever else wanted to leave the club in that period, right? There are multiple people who wanted to leave Liverpool down the years. This is a modern, successful institute now that can rival Real Madrid. We thrashed them in that other game. We absolutely killed them. Don't forget that. Going there is not an assurance of success. This Real Madrid team, as much as they're obviously doing special things in La Liga, have sucked this season. They've been really poor because they've had to find their identity or whatever, but spending that amount of money, finding your identity for that long, I'd imagine you should know your identity a little bit better than that. It's pretty poor, really, from Real Madrid. Some other people said, oh, don't get too emotionally invested. Football is ultimately an emotional game. I think beating people with this emotional stick of, oh, you shouldn't get too emotionally invested in players that don't care about you. People care about the shared experiences, the institute, the watching it with their mates. They want to have that experience. They want to have these things. I think the misunderstanding of that is when it comes down to it's just business. The same goes for a fans will turn kind of thing. And ultimately, FSG will get some blowback for this. Because they'll say, well, you didn't sign him onto the contract. He can try and push it over there. But I think the problem for him is it's happening in quite an ugly way. I wouldn't want this to happen in this way if Trent is going to leave. Ultimately, like I said this in a few Liverpool groups last night, I would want Trent to leave on good terms. I would want it that we could wish him all the best, that we felt like he was being upfront with the fans. Doesn't matter if you're being upfront with FSG, they own our club. Those two are not the same entity. Whilst we might have the same goal of winning and making more money and becoming more successful, our two narratives very often can be at odds. And that's a healthy relationship to have with your owners. Obviously, it's great to have a healthy relationship with your owners, but it's a healthy relationship to be at odds with the people in power. That's a good thing, to be at odds with the people in power and to be able to hold them accountable and responsible. You love them to understand you, but it's good also to be able to tell them, we don't want this, we want this. That's what the spirit of Shankly is. That's what all these things are. Real Madrid will realise they're unsettling him through this behaviour. You've got the Bellingham situation over there. They've done similar things at other clubs before. They've used other players to be unsettled. They've used other means to try to attract people to the club. This is Liverpool in a hierarchy. It's in a food chain, if you want to call it, though I think Liverpool eat at a very similar level to Real Madrid. Liverpool, I don't know how much we've unsettled other players before, but we signed Van Dijk from Southampton, and it always felt evident to us that he would want to sign for us because he's Virgil van Dijk. Southampton bought him because he's a good centre-back, but they knew they'd get some sell-on value. The idea with Trent was never that we get sell-on value with Trent Alexander-Arnold. It would be that he would be a huge piece in our team for a decade because he came through, we didn't have to pay the transfer fee, we developed him. That's why we invest in the academy system at Liverpool. It's what we want. And ultimately, it's frustrating to see that. I think, the odds, the ideas are odds with each other between Liverpool and Real Madrid, very different teams because of what we represent. The Real means royal. Liverpool are not historically a royalist city. They're very different to that. They boo the national anthem, those kind of things. That's not the same values. Ultimately, also, the two cities represent two different things. Madrid is the capital. Liverpool's not the capital. It was at one point probably the industrial capital of the UK. It was very much bombed during the war, those kind of things, because a lot of important things happened there. A lot of important things have passed through there. Money has passed through there. Insurance was a big thing at there. There's plenty of reasons why Liverpool has been important historically, like any other city. But again, it's not the capital. And ultimately, Madrid will realise they can unsettle people. They'll realise that putting this sort of stuff out into the press, using Marca as a mouthpiece, using the headlines, the front pages, the photoshops, all those kind of things, is a tool to put pressure on Trent to sign something or not to sign something, to put pressure on Liverpool to, give them an answer, to give them a price, to give them whatever it is that they want. And ultimately, to achieve their own goal, which is to get the best right back in the world. He could be the best right back in the Premier League if he stayed, but ultimately people would acknowledge him on another level up, which I think he's already on anyway, and I don't understand why we're not already acknowledging him there, of the Cafus and those kind of guys. I think there's an elite level that I think you can only really reach towards the end of your career. He's not even there yet. Like I said, he's 26 really. He's not really even entered his peak yet. But I think that's a big part of it, right? If you go to Real Madrid, you'll be acknowledged by the Continentals. And that's a big part of your acknowledgement and your legend in the game, which is what leads me on to my next point. The Ballon d'Or. Bro, you're not winning it if you stay here, but also you're not winning it if you go there. You'd have to have an exceptional season. You have to change your role. You'd have to get an unreal amount of assists and goals and win a Champions League and win the Premier League and ultimately, I think, challenge for something with England if that was the case. That's a lot of stars aligning. That's like 2030. That's 2026 in the US. That's all these kind of things. You need to have a great season. Ultimately, the position that you play and the other areas means you're not going to achieve that if you continue on the trajectory that you're currently on. You're a very good player. You are, fantastic. But the idea that you're going to do that permanently and the idea that you can do that from right back is probably relatively unrealistic. There have been some other very good right backs during this period, and fullbacks that haven't won it in this period because of the Messis and Ronaldos. Maybe you feel like you've got a better opportunity now. But there's even a line ahead of you at Real Madrid, which starts with Vinicius. It's seconded by Mbappe, probably a more high-profile player than Vinicius globally, and even Bellingham is behind them in that. So then you're fourth in the queue. So you want to spend 4 or 5 years at Real Madrid to let Vinicius win it once, maybe Mbappe win it twice, assisting them in doing that? You will be the person who would make them get to that level if that was the case. If you're at Liverpool, you get that praise. There will be other people who would help you work your way towards that. You'll be playing with Mo Salah potentially for another 2 seasons. You'll be playing with another elite player in Virgil van Dijk, other elite players in Konate, Alisson, Mamardashvili if he became the goalkeeper, whoever the left back was they'd signed, Ryan Gravenberch, Alexis McAllister. I don't need to name all these players. There are world-class players in this Liverpool team. Other players developing and benefiting from you. I think ultimately you realise part of the reason you wouldn't win it at either of these clubs. And you've laid that out as a goal, and I think putting it out there is amazing. Obviously, as Scousers, everyone wants to back you, but there is an element of separation right now Liverpool would back him way more if there wasn't this element of separation of, oh, you want to win the Ballon d'Or and you want to do it with us. We back you. You want to do it as a Scouser? We back you. You want to do it as a Scouser somewhere else? Okay, that's painful or it's difficult or it feels weird, but we still back you. And ultimately, I said it in my video yesterday, if this was Saudi coming in offering unreal money and a once-in-a-lifetime experience, or China, we might actually be able to understand it or justify it a little bit more. If it was MLS coming in and saying, we've got an unreal television deal for you, we've got something which will put you on the level with Messi and Ronaldo, and you'll be the face of football in the US leading up to the World Cup. To an extent, we'd understand that. We'd almost be proud of that. We were proud when Steven Gerrard went to LA Galaxy at one point. You know, these things are big for us. They feel like we've achieved something with you. But ultimately, what Liverpool fans want and why there is such a visceral and emotional reaction to this is not because the business doesn't work or the money isn't adding up or whatever. It's because they want to see him on the field. They want to support him. They want to see his free kicks. They want to see his crosses. They want to see his effort. And more recently, a lot of people have been annoyed because, and it was said a lot in my chats last night, we see you jogging back. We see you not putting what we perceive as effort into the game. And ultimately, you might be briefed by someone to be able to do that. And we've seen you make moments of great effort, do heroic things, bring Liverpool back, all that kind of stuff. You know, you came on with Mo, had that combination play that ultimately started to come back for Liverpool. Like, there's all these big moments. But in order to be a captain, in order to represent what we really want you to represent, you know, Gerrard virtually died for the shirt in some of these scenarios. There's the cramp situation, there's that Champions League final, the ultimate most heroic comeback of all time. These things are down in folklore. You are down in folklore with those guys. But ultimately, story plays a big part in this. Like, you know, Apple is a company that's got enough money to be a country that is built not only on the technology and how well it executes that technology, but the dreams it sells you with it. I said this in a video yesterday. It's the dreams it sells you with it. And it's the dreams that come with being a Liverpool fan that I think a lot of people don't understand. Saying this is business is just rubbish. It's just harsh. And a Real Madrid fan left a comment yesterday. And, ultimately, I just want to read it and see what you guys think. It says, I'm a Real Madrid fan. From our perspective, we're offering Liverpool money for Trent in the winter transfer mostly for 3 reasons, and they break this down. We want to show Trent we're serious about signing him. Okay, fair enough. That's, obviously I think he probably already knows that, but fair enough. I think ultimately this is an interesting thing though, is like maybe they're saying to this in order to show, this is part of, we don't care about the ramifications for Liverpool of us bidding on him. We don't care about the fallout we cause or the pain that we cause. We care about getting Trent Alexander-Arnold. And when he comes back and says, why did you make a bid? It makes me look terrible. They go, we really want you. We're serious about this. Are you serious about this? And, I think that's slightly twisted. I think that's slightly psychotic. I think that's slightly unhinged, but I understand it. I think it's very manipulative, which is something I understand Perez to be. So fair enough. Getting him earlier would actually be very useful from a sporting perspective and the value he could add to this season. It's another great point. Real Madrid are currently a right back down. Carvajal's obviously not there. Like there are plenty of other players who cannot play right back for Real Madrid right now. They don't have a right back. I'm not sure you'd have your traditional right back if you bought Trent, but you'd have someone who would play in that position. That square peg fills that square hole and he's labelled that way. Great, right? That's worth more than 25 million to you guys. So pay up if that's the case. That's worth Champions League winning levels, that's worth La Liga winning medals, that's worth all those kind of things. And it's worth probably a lot more to us as well. If Trent's in the team this season and in the seasons to come, but ultimately in this season, we feel that we're stronger. We feel there is maybe not defensively, even though defensively I think Trent's actually been fantastic recently. He's done a really great job. I think ultimately we realise there's goals and assists to be had for Trent. There's danger to be had. There's some elite level passes. There's enjoyment to be had for us. Like, break it down by stats or money or whatever. Winning competitions is enjoyable. Winning games is enjoyable. Watching Trent outside of any of that stuff holistically, whether you win the game or not, is enjoyable. The ball, the relationships, the vision, the free kicks that become penalties seemingly for us, all those things are incredibly enjoyable. And that's what Real Madrid want to pay the money for. That's why they want to pay him a big signing on fee. We want to maintain good relationships with the Liverpool hierarchy. I don't know whether you've already got those. I don't know if that's, I don't know why you would have good relationships with the Liverpool hierarchy. Yes, we're going to jump at a market opportunity that is good for us. But if we can propose a solution that works better for all parties, that's great. I'm sorry, I just don't think Real Madrid think like that. I don't think they care about Liverpool in any capacity. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done some of these public things. If they do care about the relationships, then they certainly aren't showing that in terms of respect in public and doing things in marca. And they certainly aren't doing that in undermining the relationship between Trent Alexander-Arnold and the Liverpool fans in everything that they're saying. So don't rubbish. Don't put out stupid stuff that makes no sense when you actually hold it up to the light. And again, I'm not going to say this guy's name. I thought it was a very good comment, actually. But ultimately, I think it's very performative, and it's what Real Madrid represent, the performativity of football outside of the reality of football. Also, I want to add this, that this sort of antagonism from Liverpool fan base is kind of surprising. Again, this patronising of a fan base and not understanding what the relationship is between them and someone else. Probably because I don't know all that many Madridistas that currently play for Real Madrid, but fair play to you. Among Real Madrid fans, Liverpool is one of the clubs we respect the most. Now, I'm going to say this. I probably agree with you. I think it's respect out of status rather than out of shared experiences. We've beaten them in the Champions League final. They've beaten us in Champions League finals. They've beaten us serially. When they came to Anfield, I found Real Madrid a very unusual fan base in the first place. I don't really relate to them in a very easy fashion. I'd love to know more about that. I'd love to do a bit more research as to why they are like that. I found them a bit disrespectful, actually. I was speaking to a Spanish guy who was there with me at the Madrid game, and he was saying some of them were chanting some unusual things about disrespectful stuff about Liverpool. So, it wasn't anything about the 97 or anything like that, but it was ultimately just saying and imposing their status and kind of calling Liverpool a bit of a small club. Found that a bit unusual. If not the club that we respect the most. We despise Manchester City because of Guardiola. Well, that's nothing to do with status in football. That's because he represents Barcelona. That's the antithesis of you. Because of the 115, because of a lot of things. Okay, I think a lot of clubs resent Man City because of the 115. But when it comes to Liverpool, there's nothing but respect. Okay, then act that way. Maybe the Real Madrid fans support that, but I don't think the Real Madrid fans and Perez necessarily have the same goals or same outlook on life. They're very different people, I'd hope. Also, the values of our club aren't that far off. We're a fan-owned club. This whole fan-owned thing, I think, is becoming a bit of a red herring for a lot of people. Like this fan-owned thing, I just don't even start me on that. Cool, you're fan-owned, in inverted commas. We're not bankrolled by any corporation or billionaire or any state or anything like that. Come on, bro. We spent within our means, and we're a community organisation that's owned by the fans and controlled by the fans. I respect that, right? I respect that last sentence, but let's not pretend that Real Madrid don't have outside interests or it's not investments, but it is bankrolling. Ultimately, the way you rebuilt your stadium is not through fan money. And ultimately, a lot of the sponsorships you have, the interest you have, was because at one point, Real Madrid was ultimately, for all intents and purposes, a state-backed exercise, enterprise, whatever you want to call it. We're not the same. Liverpool has never been a state-backed enterprise. Ultimately, England never really had a dictator at one point, so of course that wouldn't be the case. But let's not pretend that our histories are similar. Socialism, maybe there's somewhere we cross over there, I don't know. But ultimately, we're not the same. We don't come from the same ethos. We're not cut from the same cloth. Very different clubs. And it's not me trying to throw that back in this guy's face. It's just more me saying it isn't the same thing. And whilst business might, and I think this is a lot of it, is the business element of it, I think, is kind of taking over here. And I've had my experience of business over the last few years is that, ultimately we can say it's just business, but there are still feelings involved, and business doesn't negate your feelings. Ultimately, the money you earn from business may negate some feelings. Ultimately, the experiences you have through business may negate some feelings or may soften the blow of some of those things. But what happens in business can sometimes be a real mental hurdle for a lot of people and very difficult to understand and take. Fair enough. That doesn't make the loss of Trent Alexander-Arnold any easier. Rationalising it doesn't make it any easier. Saying you get money for it doesn't make it any easier. We want to see local boys in the shirt. We want to see these guys stay and back the project. We want to see these guys stay and say, I believe in what is going on here. That they value that over other things. I think leaving would be an acknowledgement that that's not the case, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's an issue. But I think let's just have it right. Let's not continually silence people by going, business, 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 and essentially playing along in business in order to keep all parties happy. Like, you know, I even thought, did I soften my take yesterday? Because I thought, well, actually, I'd love to interview Trent Alexander-Arnold. I have before. I found him so incredibly charismatic, so interesting. I'd love to be able to tell part of his story. But ultimately, I think sports marketing doesn't really work like that right now, because the people at the top of sports marketing want to whitewash it. They want to sanitize it to a degree that then they can just ultimately make their money and move on, go buy the big house and be happy. That is someone hijacking football for their own purposes. Ultimately, we can sports hate people. Sports hate, by the way, is a hatred that if you met them in real life, you go, I respect what you do, you're a really great player. But when they're out on the field, you don't like them for who they are. It's Manchester United, it's Rio Ferdinand, it's David Beckham, it's Wayne Rooney, it's all those things. You know, I had bad experiences with Wayne Rooney when I was younger. Do I hate him now as a middle-aged guy? No. Do I want him to fail at Plymouth? Absolutely not. Those things are very different. And I think the difference here, we have to make that difference with Trent and the difference with everyone else. We can resent him as a person on the field and what it represents for us and whether he wants to back the project or not. But we cannot resent him wanting to have this experience in his own life. And ultimately, a lot of Scousers and a lot of people from Liverpool would relate to that, the ambition of wanting to do that, all these kind of things. That's so important to so many people in their lives. Ultimately, people take other jobs, pay rise, all those kind of things, because they want to progress. They want to be able to provide for their own family. They want a generational wealth. And ultimately, Liverpool and Madrid are very different cities. He's a single guy, as far as actually, he does have a girlfriend, but he's single in the sense he's not married with kids, who wants to go to another city and enjoy his life. You know, he wants to go and enjoy culture and enjoy what he sees Jude Bellingham do and what he sees other players doing and sharing that experience with someone who's a good friend of his. I can't really resent that all that much. I can rationalize it almost. I'm not rationalizing it through business, I'm rationalizing it through life. I don't resent that. But at the same time, I don't think it's a good way for us to operate by beating down the Liverpool fans and going, oh, you don't get it. You guys are idiots. You're backwards because you want him to represent your club. Of course we do. Of course we want the best people at our club. Of course we want a generational talent who we're proud of, that came from the same place as ultimately I was born and plenty of other people were born, to go and do things. It's why sometimes when people say to me, you're not a Scouser, you're a Southerner, whatever, I'm like, I come from the same place as you. My parent comes from the same place as you, my granddad. Those things are of a real value to me. Not living there doesn't mean that I don't value those things. You should be proud of the people who come from your city and go somewhere else and spread what it is that you feel the city represents. I'm not saying I've got a Scouse accent and therefore everyone knows that I ultimately represent Liverpool, but you know, ultimately where you come from is important, and remembering that and framing that in a positive way is very important. So I just want you guys to remember that. Finally, I'll go on this. There was someone who said in the comments yesterday, and I do respect it, it was True Red Crime or True Crime Red. Sorry, I can't remember. I always appreciate your comments, mate. It was about, well, I don't think we should pay this too much attention. A lot of people saying I'm very tired of this narrative, and I totally get that at this point. I'm tired of it too. I think it's dragged on way too long. It's been way too bureaucratic and business-based. We're all tired of those things. We want resolution. We want something to come out in public and it be in the light. That's fair enough. But ultimately what he said was, I don't think we should pay it too much attention. It'll be the media that fan those flames. I actually think we should create forums to talk about these kind of things and be fans together so that we can have a stance on it, so that we do know who to cheer, so that we do know whose side we're on and who's on our side, and so that we are talking about it. Don't let other people control that narrative. We control it here. There's a Discord down there, there's a Patreon as well. Go enjoy it. Go get in the conversation, and I will chat to you guys again in the near future. I know you won't all have watched this the full length, but I hope you do continue to stick around on the channel. Support us on the Patreon, support us on the Discord, and I'll see you guys later. Much love. Bye.